Are you looking for an escape from manufactured truth wrapped in selfish agenda? Don't you just want to have a real and raw conversation, all masks and rules aside? That's what you're getting here at Titan Evolution Podcast. Get rid of all the nonsense information and discuss everything under the sun without filters. Listen to real stories of real people who will put your current perspectives to the test, guide you on living the life you truly want, and see everything free from judgment and pretenses. Time to get rid of those unhealthy environments and let your authentic self shine. Here are your hosts, Travis Johnson and Carol Carpenter.
Hey, welcome back to the show. We've got something geared up a little bit special for the fans today. We're actually going to interview each other. Carol's going to interview me, and then I'm going to interview Carol, and you get both of our stories jammed into one episode. We had a lot of questions about, we have these little stories we've sprinkled throughout our episodes so far. I think we're only like episode 3 in, which is fine. Thank you so much for the feedback that we've been getting, but really wanted to answer some of y'all's questions today, like kind of behind the scenes, like tell us more about Travis, tell us more about Carol, and in a role reversal here, Carol's going to kick it off and interview me first.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background. I met Travis at I wouldn't call it a retreat so much as a mastermind kind of seminar, and we spent about 6 days together. And I remember we were going around the room the first day and making an introduction. And Travis introduced himself and he said, "Hi, I'm Travis Johnson. I'm an asshole." And I just remember at that moment, I was like, I'm really not interested in anybody else here. Like, you have my attention, right? And and only because I honestly believe people that say that about themselves have so many layers underneath it. And I want to be one of those people to get to know you better because there's a reason you said that. And so that caught my attention. And I remember sitting down with Travis while we were there, and we had 6 days literally to get to know each other. And every day I was there, I liked him more and more and more, to the point that by the end of the week, I'd never met Travis before, never, ever. It was the first time. And all I wanted to do was like, I don't know how in the world we would ever work together or collaborate in anything together, but I really like you as a person. You're so genuine and kind and giving, even though you want everybody to think you're an asshole. He truly is not. But he is genuinely a good human being. And I rarely see that out of people, because majority of the time I feel like if people are being nice to one another, it's because they want something from you. I have not experienced that with Travis at all. And he is just literally that giving guy. So we talked about your past while we were there. And one of the things, I think the whole time you were telling me your story, my mouth was hitting the floor. Like I couldn't imagine somebody living through some of those things, especially as a child, because as a child, we're shaped, by our parents and the examples that are set around us. And yet, despite those examples, you turned out, I'd say, pretty fucking normal. So, so let's talk about your military last, but more so much about, your upbringing, like how you kind of ended up maybe going to the military. So everything up to that point, because you definitely do have a very interesting story.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I really appreciate the lead in there. It's very bizarre. Those that know me well or listen to my other show, the Nonprofit Architect Podcast, have really got to hear some of these stories. But for those of you that haven't heard, childhood was not an easy thing, despite all the obviously white privilege that I have, being a white dude. 36 moves, 12 states. There's 12. No, that's not right. 36. I know these numbers. 36 moves, 12 schools, 6 states, 5 different foster homes, 8 total. I had 2 family members try to kill me at different points. I've got a mother with bipolar disorder. There was bullying and a criminal record and all sorts of craziness that happened. But really, there was so many people that helped me along the way, always someone willing to keep us sheltered, clothed, and fed, that even though it was tough, there was always someone there, someone willing to pour into my life. And I'm not sure how this happened, but I was able to largely remain objective when these things were happening. And so many times we hear stories like, well, this is how I was conditioned as a childhood. And the research agrees with you that from birth to 7 years old, you are essentially in receiving mode without any kind of filter. It's not till around 7 years of age or second grade-ish that we as humans develop a filter, and everything that we've been conditioned with is then, the lens in which we view that filter, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not sure how exactly this worked out for me, but was very able to remain largely objective through all the nonsense. My standard operating procedure I was downloaded with said that I was smart and handsome, but we moved a lot, right? So the moving all the time wasn't a disaster for me because that's what I was conditioned with. And it wasn't
But
until
why did you move a lot?
we moved a lot because my mother has bipolar disorder. So every time she needed full-time treatment, and I think her father or my father and her divorced when I was 3, whenever we needed full-time treatment, she would go into a full-time facility when those were available, a state hospital. And then my sister and I would go live with a family member, go into foster care. When we were very young, most of the time we went to live with my grandmother, Joanne, who's an amazing woman. And when she got out of treatment, when my mom got out of treatment, we'd have to go live somewhere else. Obviously, she wasn't paying rent the whole time that she was not being held captive. That's probably not the right word. She was getting treatment. She wasn't paying rent. So we'd live in a place, move in with grandma, have to move into a new place when she got out and got custody. The rules in, the first part of the 19th or the 20th century were, you could be held against your will at a mental health facility. And I don't remember the rule that broke that thing, but the pendulum swung the other way that said if you were only could be committed against your will if you were a danger to yourself or others. And her largely being a non-violent person, I say largely non-violent person, she retained custody throughout the whole time, when my sister and I were living with someone else when she was in treatment.
Well, so the question is, if she was mentally unstable, right, why was she continuously allowed to come back and get you from your grandmother's? I mean, I would have thought that would have been an absolute no-go.
Because she always went of her own volition. She was never forced into there because you couldn't force someone unless they were a danger to herself or others. So when she got to that point where she was either through self-discovery or someone pointed out to her that she was definitely not doing well, she went and checked herself in. She was never forced. If it would have come to light that she was a danger to herself or others, us being the kids, she would have lost custody.
So just because she self-admitted, she could get you back.
Yep.
Oh, it's a shame. Because
I don't know if that was the 80s or the 90s. I don't know if that was the rules of the time or the area. I'm not sure quite why it worked out that way, but that's the way it worked out.
Yeah, it's just such a disruption in your lives, especially when you're children. And if you have a stable environment that you're in, to pull you out of it and throw you back into chaos is horrible.
Yeah, it sure was not the best.
Yeah. So did you have a relationship with your dad at any point in all this, or did he just pretty much bow out? Or
it's very hard at any level to maintain a relationship with someone that has an unmedicated problem, especially mental illness as severe as bipolar disorder. My mother also got the joyous wonder of having hallucinations, both auditory and visual, which are more of a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but she had those as bipolar, and she really didn't have the depression. It was essentially mania or not, but she would also have hallucinations. And trying to be in a relationship with someone like that, there's a lot of challenges. So even though he wanted to be in our life and wanted to be our father and do this stuff, it was so difficult, obviously, between his alcoholism and her bipolar disorder. really hard to make any kind of relationship work. He ended up working for the state of Minnesota, traveling as a boiler inspector all over the state all the time, really worked a lot of 16+ hour days. And this isn't an excuse or anything like that, but it wasn't until I made the decision to move out of my family's house at 16 and move in with my grandmother full time, was that room made in my life to be able to build that relationship and foster that relationship out. Now, my dad and I have a great relationship.
Oh, that's wonderful. At least something positive came out of it, right? Geez. Okay. So sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt you about your whole dad thing, but so progressing forward from your mom being checked in and out, your relationship with your sister?
Is completely severed at this point.
From childhood?
We've made attempts over the years to try to rebuild the relationship. Unfortunately, she has not made the effort to take care of her own mental well-being. I don't know how it is that I was not affected by bipolar disorder. It runs in our family, on my mom's side, but it seems to only affect the women for whatever reason. Like my great grandmother, whom I've met, my great grandmother whom I've met, my grandmother, my mom, and my sister, and not confirmed diagnosis, but my sister's daughter as well, all seem to suffer from some kind of mental health challenge. And I have a relationship with my mom now because she's willing to try to work on staying mentally well most days. When my sister, up until, I think she's getting treatment right now, but up until now hasn't been willing to do that. And she's 38 or 39 right now. Whatever the math is. I think she's 39. I'm 40. She's 39, and has 4 kids and has largely been unwilling to take responsibility for anything. Terrible things have happened to her. Terrible things have happened to me. But here's the big secret for all those people going through something terrible. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. Sure. Identifying fault doesn't help anybody on the slightest. It's taking responsibility for the situation you're currently in, seeking healing for whatever that may be, and having the responsibility to move forward with your life. And I can say that really easily, but it's much easier to say than it is to do. I'm not under any delusions that because it rolls off the tongue because I've said it so many times, does that make that thing easy? It's simple to define, but not easy to implement.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is taking accountability for it. And I think that's probably what our issue as a society is these days, because it's easier just to place blame on other people. Like, this is happening to me because somebody else is doing it, versus just saying, this is happening to me because I allowed it to happen. Or this is happening to me and it's because I'm not recognizing my condition and getting help for it, right?
Yeah.
You can make excuses for it, but at the end of the day, when you finally can be, accountable for it and then recognize it and then move forward, it's the only time anything's going to change.
Yeah, we see this, especially in the American culture, quite a bit. Whose fault is it? Is it the president's fault? Is it the economy's fault? Is it the weather's fault? Is it Black people or white people or Mexican or immigrants or whatever, whatever label? Oh, it's Christians, whatever the label, whatever the thing you're mad at is.
Right.
It doesn't matter, A, that you're mad. It doesn't matter, B, that you've assigned blame to them. It only matters if you're pointing the finger at them or the finger at you. And by pointing the finger at you is not fault, it was responsibility. Even though this situation may exist and these conditions may be real or not real, I'm not saying that at all. It's still up to you to decide what you're going to do with your life. I remember being in trailer parks and foster homes. I remember the terrible things that I experienced and have been through. But all those things happening doesn't relieve me of the personal responsibility of getting healing, which is not a quick process. I'm sure there's things that still bother me. I'm sure there's still things that would trigger me. I'm sure there's sights or smells or people or situations where I would all of a sudden be back in that situation and have real fear and real problems ensue from that. But I had to take the responsibility to search out that healing, to work on that, to become a better person and a husband and a father and a human being and a guy. And that's not easily done, regardless of the circumstances.
No, it takes time. And it's also self-awareness, but so then did you, once you moved in with your grandmother, did you have like ambitions and dreams that there was a particular path that you wanted to go?
I'm not really sure. Moving in with her was the stability I needed to have a chance. Right. Foster care, there's a lot of stuff floating around about foster care. My foster parents, all of them were amazing. And that home situation was better than my home situation. Right. I was never left in weird people's houses for uncomfortable lengths of time around people kids have no business being around. Like that didn't happen in foster care. I was in loving, stable homes that were clean and there was food every mealtime and all of these things. Like foster care was great for me. I had wonderful parents and still keep in contact with many of them. But, getting moved out into a place where I knew I wasn't going to be forced to move again, to have that stability that I knew that when I come home every day, that grandma would be there and be able to, provide those meals and those things. I was 16 when I moved out. I said, look, if you love me, Mom, in any way, shape, or form, you're going to let this happen. You're not going to say nothing about it. And she never did. She let me move out, let me build my life as a person. I graduated high school at 17 and thought I would take a year off to find myself. What I found was that working minimum wage jobs all over town, even though I was working 3 jobs, sucks because you can never make any real money. Right. I'd get up and I'd open the Burger King as like a shift supervisor. It was like right down the street from me. It was like a 5-minute walk. And then I'd go across town and work at the bowling alley lunch counter because up in the north from Minnesota originally, like there's great food at bowling alleys, like handmade pizzas and malts.
That's so crazy to me though.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
at a bowling alley.
Most places other than the Midwest, bowling alleys are just like fried food and no one cares. But like in the Midwest, especially the upper Midwest, like food and bowling alleys, it's a destination. Like I still go home and go there for lunch. I get a Philly steak or Philly chicken or something. Absolutely delicious. Soup of the day, all that stuff. But then I would see my girlfriend, who's now my wife, for a couple hours, and I'd go and load truck at Walmart from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. I did that 5 days a week. And yeah, I could definitely do that at 17. I can't do that now. I'm not interested in that kind of behavior. But it was my dad approached me with a job offer, and by the numbers, I'm a complete fool for turning it down. He got, I guess, one of my cousins on his side that I never really had exposure to his side of the family, really couple here and there, but not really like ingrained into his side of the family. One of the cousins was running the maintenance out at the local community college and could get me on at $18 an hour in 1999, which
my God, that was big money back then, dude.
Yeah. Minimum wage is like either $5.15 or $6 or $5.75 or something like that. So like essentially tripling whatever my income was at the time. And I was like, Dad, I got 3 jobs. He's like, get rid of those 3 crappy jobs and get one good job. I heard the words and it had the impact with me, but I didn't feel like the job he was putting me into, he could see the whole path. I couldn't see the whole path. I felt like he was getting into a dead end job. What I didn't know, and now I know later, is that with him being a boiler inspector, is you go work a maintenance job, you get your boiler inspector license, your boiler license, and then you go through the training to become an inspector, and then you can essentially write your own ticket because there's like steam engine shows and there's boat inspections and there's commercial, there's all these different ways to make money. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know. Right.
Yeah.
But I took the advice of getting rid of 3 crappy jobs and getting one good job, and I joined the Navy. And at this point, I had made some good choices. I had found Jesus, I had found my wife, and I had joined the Navy. All of them didn't care where I came from. They didn't care about my family name. They didn't care about my criminal record. They didn't care about any of the other shit in my world. Right.
Can we just put criminal record? What?
Yes. Criminal record. Yes, it's expunged. No, I'm not going to go into details of all the things I'm willing to talk about. I'm not willing to talk about what happened, and I'm not willing to divulge classified information. Everything else is open to discussion.
We're okay. Gotcha. I was like, dude, really?
Yeah.
I could I would have never in a million years guessed that.
Right. Because that's not who I really am. Right. That was a situation that happened, and we didn't have the money to defend it properly with the proper attorneys, because had I had that, and really had I told my dad, he would have got me an attorney, and the thing never would have happened. It never would have, it doesn't meet the sniff test, but the thing happened, and it was on my record for over a decade. I had to go back later as a naval officer to show what a good person I was to get this thing expunged and removed. Because anyone that really knows the story is like, well, that's ridiculous. Everyone does that. But I still refuse to say what it was.
No, you don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. Yes, we'll respect your confidentiality in that.
Yes.
So, okay. So then you join the Navy.
I did. Well, I proposed to my now wife, and then later joined the Navy without telling her. Which look, the flat out, the only thing you need to know is that my wife's amazing, and that's why it worked out. Because she came home from work and was like, "Hey, I joined the Navy," and she was like engaged to me. She's like, "Well, okay," because what can you say at that point? It's not a lot you can say.
It's not like, no, you're not going. No, it doesn't work that way. So how many years have you been married now?
We have been married for 21 years, but we've been sweethearts since 99. Oh,
that's just so cute.
Yeah, I totally stole that sweetheart line from someone because I heard it and I was like, this is a great way to describe the whole situation. So 21 years official, sweetheart since 99, however many years that is. I'm not doing the math, 23 years or something. But yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the military and what you did there without getting obviously anything classified.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go to jail for that stuff. I've been to jail, not recommended. So I went off to the recruiter, and by the way, the day he showed up to take me to like boot camp, like I had a friend's like walking boot on my leg and the crutches. So when he walked up, I saw his face drop because I'm just that person. And he got to the door and he's like, "What is going on?" I was like, "Nothing. I was just messing with you." He's like, "Dude, my heart dropped. Like, I can't believe." But he's an aviation guy, aviation mechanic. And I asked my dad, I was like, what should I do? He's like, "I don't know what you should do," but he's like, they treat those aviation boys pretty well. So I signed up to fix work on ejection seats on F-18s, and went to boot camp, went to my A school down in Pensacola, Florida, and then I took out my first duty station in Lemoore, California. If you ever get a chance to go to Lemoore, go ahead and pass on that. It is the armpit of humanity. Of course, I hadn't been there in 20 years now, so it might be better, but it's like, it's all cotton fields, and it's like between two mountain ranges. So when they spray for bugs, like the pesticides never leave. It's really dark and dreary. It's got 2 seasons, disgustingly hot, and fog. This fog that you could like take a knife and cut the fog out. It's so thick you can't see the hood ornament on your car. It's like that thick of fog. It's insane. And I joined in July of 2000. So I was in for a year when 9/11 happened, which is crazy. A lot of people that we know are veterans joined after now. I joined before 9/11. But before that, quick story aside, they filmed the movie Behind Enemy Lines at my squadron. Owen Wilson, Gene Hackman actually got to mount a movie camera in an F-18 for the photo shoot when they're doing the movie, which was pretty cool. No way. And then 9/11 happened, and like I'm in my apartment. I've now been married to my wife. I graduated high school in 99, joined the Navy in 2000, married my wife in 2001. And so we had just gotten married like a couple months ahead of time, right? So we're at peace when I joined the Navy. I got a phone call from my dad at 5:30 in the morning, whatever time that is, from New York to California, whatever the time difference is. And my dad's like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's 5:30. I work the night shift. I get off at like 10 p.m. Like, I'm sleeping. He's like, turn on the TV. And I'm all groggy. I'm like, turn on the TV. He's like, turn on the TV. I was like, what channel? He's like, any channel. And I turned it on just in time to see the second plane hit the towers. And I said, what is going on? He's like, we're under attack. We're at war. And here I am, just barely a year into the Navy, not knowing what's going on or what's going to happen. And all the bases were on lockdown. Every car was on full search. It took hours to get on base that day. Really changed everything in the military. Bases, I don't know if you guys know this, but bases used to be open to civilians. Like, young ladies would come party on the clubs on base.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah. They used to come, all the ladies from the local towns would come party at the base club to find a husband or company for the weekend, and then, take the bus back out in town.
Waiting for the recall?
That changed after 9/11, when people that didn't have military IDs were now restricted for coming onto base.
Yeah, I've never actually tried to get on base, but I've always heard that it required people to have ID to get on there, and you have to be approved to get in. So I was like, oh.
It has for the last 20 years, but before that, very trusting. People could get on. Most people just didn't. But the gals out in town definitely knew where they could go find someone with a stable income.
Oh my God.
It's what it was.
So then, okay, so you how many years in the Navy did you serve?
22 years. I did my first 11 enlisted. So I started at the very bottom as an E1, made it up to E6 within 7 years. Really was at a big point in my life where, as a young man, most young men are pretty cocky and they like to run their mouth. I got to a point where I stopped running my mouth. I really was focused on my family finances. And then I really wanted to surround myself with the people in my life that were doing good things, who was taking care of their career, who was taking care of their family, who was going to college, who was really doing the good things that I wanted to do. And I shut my mouth and I started hanging out with those guys. And within 2 years, I was named Instructor of the Year, and I got accepted to a program called the Seaman to Admiral program. They would take you from the lowest ranks and get you commissioned so you could climb up the officer ladder, which a lot of people don't even attempt to do. I'm not sure why they don't attempt to do it. The pay difference is absolutely astronomically different.
Because possibly they might not want to put in the work. Is it? I mean, it's got to be hard work.
It could be the work. It could be their opinion of officers. It could be life circumstances with their point in their career where they just can't swing it. And fortunately for my wife Megan, every time I had a career thing come up, I'd ask her, it's like, what do you want to do? And she's like, whatever's best for your career was always the answer, which is just such a wonderful answer. It's so helpful because we decided on our roles in the relationship early, that I was going to be working full time for the military, no matter what we chose. And then she wanted to, and that was what she decided. She really wanted to take care of the house and maybe do supplemental income. And then when we had kids, then she pulled back on that. We never had daycare. So we really were on key that, hey, whatever's best for your career is what we're doing. She's like, I'll fill whatever support role you need, and this is how we're going to do it. So at my 9-year mark, I asked people, I was like, did you guys ever think about doing this? I asked a lot of the old timers in the Navy. An old timer in the military is anyone over 30, just so we're all clear on that.
Oh my God. Okay. That's
most
young.
People get out of the military before they hit 23. And when you're 30, you're most likely 12 years into the military out of a 20-year career. That's just the age range. Unless you're a commissioned officer and you hit captain 06 or some kind of flag level or general, when you're wearing stars, 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars on your collar, you have been in for 30 plus years. But the vast majority of people don't hit their 22nd birthday in the military. They just really don't. You're in for 2, 3, 4 years, and then you're done. Vast majority of people. So talking to my elders in their 30s, I was like, you guys ever want to do this? And some of them like, yeah, but I wanted to fly. So I went through the flying program. And by the time I got back around to considering being an officer, I was too old. I kept hearing that. It's too old, too old, too old. Ask my dad, who was in the Navy in the 70s. They always have time requirements because especially aviation, right? You have to be a pilot by the time you're 25, or a naval flight officer by 27, based on years you're able to give back to the military. Fortunately for me, having prior enlisted time, they moved those years out a little bit. So you had to be commissioned by age 27 to be a pilot, or 29 as a naval flight officer. And there ain't no chance, or it was 29 and 30, whatever. I had to be commissioned by 31 in order to do the program I wanted to do. And my dad's like, look, if that's what you want, apply and don't let nothing stop you. You know, he got told year after year that he should be an officer, but he always wanted to make chief first. Making chief in the Navy is a big deal. It's a huge milestone in the enlisted. And he just kept felt like every year I was going to make it, and then I was going to apply for the other thing, but I never made chief. And then he just used that to never apply for the other thing, to be an officer.
Oh,
Which is heartbreaking, right? Because when I was in my career, I really wanted to make chief. And that was one of my bigger regrets, not hitting that benchmark. But he's like, if this is what you want to do, he's like, do it and don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anyone else derail you, change your mind, put their stuff onto you, whatever that is. And so I did. It's like, hey, I was going to college at the time. I said, I'm going to apply for this, and I'm going to apply to be a limited duty officer, which is no degree required. If both of them say no, I'm going to finish my degree and apply for OCS for the Navy, Officer Candidate School. And if they say no, I'm going to apply to ODS or OTS, whatever it is, for the Army, and I'm going to go that way. So once I determined for me and my family what I was going to do, nothing could stop me. My first application, one out of 850 applications for 29 slots, I got selected my first application, my first time up.
wow. And how many times do typically people have to resubmit for these applications to actually be looked at?
Generally speaking, it's about 4 times. On your 4th application, you can expect to get
picked
picked
on the
up.
first.
And I did my first. There was a gal in that program with me that she was on her 12th application before she got accepted.
Oh my God.
Well, if you're determined of what you're going to do with your life,
yeah,
right? I had to wait for my military record, my criminal record to drop off before I could apply. And then I had only one shot to apply to make the program so I could graduate college before my 31st birthday.
Right.
So I applied, I got accepted.
Time sensitive.
Very time sensitive. So I applied, I got accepted, and then went to college because I had to have a degree. I had to you graduate and you commission on the same day. So I had 5 semesters. I had summer, fall, spring, summer, and fall for me to get finished. So I did my degree in a year and a half, got my degree completed, got commissioned. I was 30, got commissioned and completed my degree with a wife and 2 kids. And it was like,
wow.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts, absolutely bananas. And then from there, I had to go to flight school. So we moved the family to Pensacola for a year, 2012.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea how long flight school was going to be. No one can tell you because there's all these different. It's like a tree. There's all these different branches and pathways you can go, and depending on how well you do in school and what you qualify for and what your desires are and the needs of the Navy are, like, determine your path. So like this path is so complicated. So from the time that I decided to apply, this is 2009, to the time I got into school, completed my degree, commissioned, making through flight school to get my wings, that was 4.5 years. From 2009 to 2013, I got my wings.
Somebody's an overachiever and a fast tracker.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But what a lot of people don't know is the dropout rate or the attrition rate for aviation is really high.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. We second only to special forces. Like when I started my class, I got rolled back a class because in aviation, it's A is for average and B is for barely passing, because if you get a 79, you fail. And you can only have 3 failures in the Navy before they kick you out of the program. And the Marines, it's only 2. So I got like a 76 on an exam, navigation of all things. That's something I'm actually really good at. And you had to retest like the next morning. You went in for remediation, you retested the next morning. If you didn't pass that time, get at least an 80, you were rolled back. And that was your two failures. You only had one more shot left. But I guess I only needed one more day because the next day I got a 96. So like I got to stay with my class and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
But you know, at this point, it's already like 6 weeks into school, but you already had private flying time. So I have like 13 hours on a Cessna, and I got to fly solo. That's by myself with no, 13 hours of flight time. It's all it takes for you to let them take an airplane by yourself. And I thought that was like completely bizarre because I was terrified the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Completely terrified. But at that point, I still had another 18 months before I got my wings, before I actually was a winged aviator, before you actually made it, right? I'm only like 3 months into this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just absolutely nuts. But anyone that's been to flight school will tell you, like, it's hard. You have to dedicate a lot of time. Most people go to flight school when they're 22, 23, 24. And here I am, 30 with a wife and 2 kids, and my wife's working and trying to go to school. Plus you're swimming. You have to swim a mile with your flight suit, boots on, and a helmet. You got to swim a mile without using the walls and equipment under an hour.
In the event of a crash or something, you can, survive. Wow. That's a lot of gear.
Yeah. So you're going to school, and then you have swimming periods throughout the day where you're going to swim in the pool, and they make sure you can do all these things all at the same time.
And that's probably why the age range is so much younger, right? And giving back to the military, I would assume, because this sucks, but when you get pregnant, depending on your age, they start categorizing you. And when you're in your 20s, that's like the best time to have children. And apparently by the time you hit 30, they start calling you a geriatric mother. And you're like, oh,
only in this country.
My ovaries are now geriatric. Thank you.
But only in this country, because in places like Honduras, the healthcare is terrible, and they keep getting pregnant back to back to back as long as they can do it, because of all the hormones your body produces to take care of the baby, takes care of you as well. And then they also have a term, I can't remember what the term is, but it's basically the whole village mothers, because women continue to feed other people's kids. And there's a word for it. Well, it's like team mom, or whatever that is.
Well, I think that's, so long as you keep producing those hormones, it keeps keeping the estrogen high, which it's strange, but here it's like you have your kids and you're like, ping, ping, you're off, and then you move on. So, probably the $1 billion business there is for beauty and anti-aging, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just saying. But anyways, so it's interesting that you would go from the military and then go into something, like your nonprofit architect. So, segueing into that, like, how'd you get involved with that? Did you always know this was something you wanted to do, or did this accidentally kind of fall into your lap, or,
Well, it was really weird, because I had never called a place home before. And I was into my 30s, and I got stationed back, so I went from F-18s to Oklahoma City to work on the E-6B. And I went through flight school and came back to the same community, Oklahoma City, on the E-6B. And I got to a point, I was like, what's this feeling? I was trying to identify a feeling. I was like, what is this feeling? Is this what home feels like? I was into my mid 30s before I could ever say someplace was home for me. And then once I was like, this is home. This is home. I've been here for a while. I feel safe and secure. Like, this is home. And it was my mid 30s before I could have that feeling, which I know breaks your heart. But then my next question was like, well, how do I be part of the community? I didn't know what that took. And I asked people, I was like, hey, what does it take to be part of a community? I asked people at church, and they were like, well, people in the community show up for community things. They get out and vote. They help. They volunteer. They clean up stuff. They serve on boards and committees, and they help people in the community. And I had a discussion like, well, how do I find people that do this? And he's like, I've got a friend for you to meet. I went to this network meeting. I didn't know anybody. I just knew that I could show up, have a great attitude, and be willing to help. And I showed up, had a great attitude, be willing to help. And it's a much longer conversation, but, got hooked up with some people doing some great things. We helped build a memorial for someone that their daughter was doing great stuff, got killed in a car wreck, and we built a memorial for her out of the first site that she volunteered at to clean up Crystal Lake in South Oklahoma City, not Friday the 13th Crystal Lake, like just Crystal Lake in Oklahoma City. It was full of tires and all sorts of, they cleaned it up, and then we ended up building a memorial out there for her, which is wonderful. But then it led to volunteer time, and I've got over 1,500 hours volunteered. My wife and I have given over $40,000 to nonprofits, and ended up serving on a board of a few nonprofits in Oklahoma City. And then I got stationed in the Middle East in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and they were like, I got to do something positive. I was doing all this great nonprofit stuff. Well, how am I supposed to keep myself out of trouble by doing something positive? Because my family stayed in Oklahoma when I went over there, and they're like, well, you should start a podcast. I was like, podcast? I don't know anything about podcasting. They're like, well, you kind of have a podcasting voice. And, we always hear ourselves different than other people hear us. I was like, I don't have a podcasting voice. He had to like set a trap to trick me into recording myself so he could play it back for me. So I could go, oh, whose beautiful voice is that? He's like, it's you, dummy. Like, this is what we hear. I was like, that's what you guys hear? No kidding. That's great. And, convinced me to start a podcast. And I had looked into all of the top like nonprofit shows, and none of them at the time were sharing how to do something. So I really set an intention for wanting to help nonprofits do it better. Nonprofits helped me immensely growing up, and I couldn't just pick one to support. I wanted to help all of them do it better. And the best way I thought I could do that is by interviewing experts. Expert, I think, is someone who makes their living in a certain field, doing a certain thing. So I had a bunch of nonprofit leaders that were doing this full time. I had business leaders that were doing it. I had consultants and specialty people, help you run your email and get the Google ad grant, all this stuff. And I invited them on. I was like, hey, how do you do the thing? And the requirement is that everyone had to come on and share how they do the stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I've got 140 episodes and counting of experts coming into sharing how they do the thing that they get paid full time for in the nonprofit world, which is wonderful. A lot of leadership, a lot of stuff that applies to regular business, not just a nonprofit business. So really great conversations.
Wow. That is quite the transformation from foster care all the way to being a successful entrepreneur in what you do. And quite honestly, when I found out that you did podcasts, I was like, God, I would never have guessed. Like, I just figured military, and then, you do something aviation wise, like even out of the military.
That's what most of the guys I work with do. They're working for Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, FAA's headquarters here in Oklahoma City. We've got a huge nonprofit sector here. There's lots of things. And I was like, you know what? I really don't want to show up to go work for somebody else. My kind of later in life transition, we talked about, staying objective. And then I talked about finding Jesus and my wife in the Navy. And then I talked about learning how to shut my mouth, take care of my finances, surround myself with good people. And then when I was over in Bahrain, I had really been listening to a lot of business books and really building myself up with my knowledge that, because you can educate yourself, right? We've got YouTube University, we've got audiobooks, all these different things. Like, you can learn, like, everything is available to learn now. It wasn't available in the 80s and 90s, where you had to pay to go to school, or you had to go to a library and check stuff out or buy the books that we couldn't afford. But now, great podcasts like obviously this one exists for free. People are telling you how to do everything on YouTube for free. They're sharing on TikTok, and then we're publishing audiobooks and all sorts of stuff.
There's an overabundance of information for sure.
There is. But later in life, I really found out that, about community and business and podcasting, and those things really changed my trajectory, like all the other points in my life. But this one projected me out of the military. I didn't feel like I could pursue the things I wanted to in business and podcasting, and also serve in the military. Like this podcast right here, the Titan Evolution podcast, there's no way I could do this show and still be active duty, right? The disclaimers I'd have to go through, the illicit content, cuss words, and really sharing some of these stories and opinions. Like, I didn't feel like it was right to do while I was still serving. So I waited till I retired at my, 22 years of service. I was about 11 enlisted and about 11 commissioned. I had to actually turn down.
By the way, thank you, obviously, for your service, because, we just celebrated, July 4th, and a lot of people forget that we have this freedom because of all the individuals that gave their time.
Well, hey, you're worth it.
Oh.
And just for the record, I don't celebrate July 4th. I celebrate Independence Day, which happens to be on July 4th, but I don't celebrate a day of the month. I don't celebrate December 25th either. I celebrate Christmas, but
Christmas, yes.
All kidding aside, I know everyone just calls it the 4th of July, but
yeah, they do.
But it's
just firework pew pew day.
It's firework day. Yeah. But these the latest revelations in my life, I've always been a questioner, which is tough in the military. I've always had different thoughts than really because of my upbringing and the ways that I experienced life was so much different than so many people. Like I never really fit into the military. I was able to do this stuff and do good things and people love me for it. But like, as far as fitting in, they were never like, oh, Travis, that's our guy. He's our company man. Never been a company man.
Travis, I have to say, the more and more we talk to other entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that it seems to be a commonality, besides the fact that they overcome these hardships and adversity, is that I've heard every single one of them say, which I've always said, also, and it's a commonality, is I see things differently. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because the more I hear it, I'm like, shit, yeah, like I say the same thing, but why is it we're all saying it? It's our perspectives are very different than what, the conventional way of thinking would be. We question it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I experienced growing up is because I was in so many different places, I always got to see people doing the same thing in a different way. All right. Tell me if you've ever heard this. It's my way or the highway.
Oh yeah. My dad.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people's dads. I don't know if this same generation, if the, Generation Zers are listening to this, if they heard that, I don't know if they did or not, but definitely, people 35, 40 plus, like you've heard that. And I thought it very peculiar to see 3 different people in 3 different locations accomplishing the same thing, but all 3 of them doing it very differently. And all 3 of them said it's my way or the highway. And I thought that very peculiar because I seen it done differently and the job still got accomplished. They did it a very specific way, but they were not interested in doing it any other way.
Well, it's the saying of there's 10 ways or more to skin a cat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can only think of 5.
Well, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
at the
absolutely.
End of the day, I mean, you're talking about end goal, and there's so many ways to get to that end goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A mutual friend of ours, Craig Hanley, posted today all the different ages people started their businesses and their careers. Like, oh, I'm 30, I can't do this, or I'm 40, or I'm 50, and I can't do this.
Really? Dude.
People say this, right? But Colonel Sanders didn't
late
start
bloomer.
KFC till he's in his 60s, right? There's no time requirement based on the age you are to do something. I see people in their 80s that do slalom water skiing. I see people in their 70s that are bridge jumping or doing bungee. Like there's no age requirement. There's no limit to these stuff.
Who put that limitation? Who put that mindset, right? Into everybody's minds that, hey, this is, when you reach this age, you should know better. It's like, really? When I reach that age, I want to be doing dumb shit because then I'm living.
But there's no limits, right? We are living in a no limit world. And the only way people think they have limits is that they were conditioned or told, and then they believed it and onboarded it. Like there's some kind of like limits that we have. There's no limits. If you looked at my history, my stat sheet that says I've moved all these times, been all this foster care, people in my family tried to kill me. Like, what would you think of that person? They got a criminal record? Like, oh, yep, this person, society says
for that life, literally doomed to that life, right? Yeah.
Oh, foster care, right? Oh yeah. We don't expect nothing out of these kids.
Exactly.
And it's a point of contention with abortion rights in whatever country that you're in. We're in America, they're saying, well, quality of life. We'll call it quality of life. It's not an abortion question. It's the decide to have the kid, now what question. But people talk about like, oh, they're just going to end up in foster care, and then what? It's almost every time I've heard it explained is like, whoever's in that situation, they just get cast off, and society expects nothing of them. Well, if you don't expect anything out of people, you're not going to get anything out of people.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have to expect whatever the standard is. And then once everyone hits the standard, you have to push that standard higher. You got to push it higher again, and you got to push it higher again to get the amazing things that we've created.
Yeah. But if you expect very little to happen, very little will happen.
If you expect very little, you'll often be disappointed and get less.
Yeah, true. Wow. Well, you've had quite the life story. And I know it's not always easy to share, especially since, we have to talk about ourselves sometimes. And I think people want us to fill in the blanks because they do hear little sprinklings of our little, I want to call them our little golden nuggets, but they're golden nuggets to latch onto because, hey, it came from real hard life experiences, and we can laugh about it now because we've overcome it. But it's when you're going through it, you are not fucking laughing about it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And if we can save somebody else from having to go through the depth of what we had to go through, God, I hope we can.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so important to have these conversations because like you said, your jaw was on the floor the first time you heard my story. Because when you look at me, I'm a happy-go-lucky, fun, engaging, average-looking white dude. Like, you don't expect that story to be attached to this.
Now, I won't agree with the average-looking one, but I'm going to say something a little sweeter. No, you're not average-looking, honey. You're above average.
Oh, thanks. I think you're above average too.
Touche.
The whole point is that everyone goes through a mountain of shit. Doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank or what's parked in your driveway. None of that stuff matters because every level of what everyone does is hard, especially if you've not done it before. You think it was easy going through college in a year and a half? No, it was impossible. And then when I did it, I was like, oh, well, that was easy. As soon as I completed it, almost instantly, you feel like it was nothing because you made it through it. Like, well, if I made it through it, like, it can't be that hard.
It's like having a child, right? When you have a child, you don't know what you're getting into. And then when you're in it, you're like, oh, fuck, how am I going to get out of this, right? But then which by the way, you can't. But then, I raised two boys. And when you get out the other end, you're just kind of like, wow, I'm so glad. And you had mentioned this earlier, you guys had each discussed, what your contribution was going to be into the relationship, right? And she was going to stay at home and be a mom, and please do not discount that, because that is one of the hardest jobs for reals.
It's
right?
huge.
And the amount of stress that you're under, because when you're a first-time mom too, you want to do it right, and you really, you fuck up badly, but regardless of that, you learn, right? Second one doesn't nearly get it as bad as the first one, but
yeah, you're less nervous and you're a little bit more casual. And well, like my wife, huge props to my wife. A lot of the time she was a single mom because I was deployed, or I was at some school somewhere, or I was in the Middle East during COVID. When COVID started, I was 2 months before coming home, and they talked about stopping everyone's orders to where people weren't going to be able to transfer and, transmit COVID. Like, she thought that I was going to have to stay for another 6 months or longer. Right.
Yeah.
And, the families, especially the military families, where the person is gone for weeks, days, weeks, months, years on end, is just an insane amount of pressure, of stress, because the paychecks were coming in, but I wasn't there to hold her.
Yeah.
I could send her a note. I could call her. I could FaceTime.
Just like we talked about with Ira, the one thing you can't ever get back is the time, and that's the most precious commodity. But, you have great relationships with your kids, and I think that says it all.
Yeah. Bet you didn't think we were going to fill up that whole time with just my story, did you?
Holy shit, did we?
Yeah, it's been an hour already. Like, we don't even have time for me to interview. We'll have to do a separate episode where I interview
We'll
you.
do a separate one. Yeah, we'll do a separate one. It's all good. But yeah,
and you still have questions for me anyway.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm done with you, Travis. We're done.
I'm done
Cut
with
it
you.
off. Tape's over.
Yeah. No. But yeah, it's in. I honestly, when I met you, did not know like your whole story, because like I said, I put everybody, like I generally just go, oh, okay. And then when I hear stories, I'm like, holy fuck, did not see that one coming, like total blindside. Because you're so like naturally calm and serene, and like you would never guess you had that type of chaotic, childhood. And how could you have that kind of chaos in your life and be so different now? You just seem really like you have the balance.
Thank you. It means a great deal to me. The reason that is because I spent years working on my healing, years working out. I didn't have the good examples. My mom I had two stepdads during that time. My dad had two other wives. My grandmother had four husbands. Like, when we get the examples, and every bit of life provides us examples, sometimes it's the example of what to follow. Sometimes it's the example of what not to do. There's a little anecdotal story out there, talks about the twins that had an alcoholic father. One twin was an alcoholic. The other one is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And they both have the same answer when they say, why are you the way they are? The alcoholic says, well, you see, my father was an alcoholic. I had no choice. And when he asked the other kid, the successful kid, what he attributes his success to, and you see, my father was an alcoholic. I had no choice. He had no choice but to reject the example he was given. And the other twin did not. And the reality is that we all have the choice. Is it difficult? It is. But if you're in a situation, you're listening to this right now, and you're not happy with where you are, if you're not where you want to be, you have to decide. You have to get visceral. You have to get emotional about the decision to break away from your programming that you got from birth to 7 years old. You have to realize that, unbeknownst to the person telling you, people have lied to you. They have projected their fears onto you. They have told you you can't do something when you can because they didn't feel like they could do it. Or your teachers, your pastor, your friends, your family, your whomever didn't have the experience to tell you that something else was possible. Here's the deal. We all have the opportunity to design what we want our lives to look like. Is it a fast process? It's not. It wasn't until 25 that I found the holy state of debt forgiveness, Dave Ramsey, and he taught me that I shouldn't have BS consumer debt. I didn't know this because I never got taught, but I sought out the solution. I was like, how am I supposed to get out of this? I asked the question. I said, hey, I'm in a place I don't like being. How do I get out of it? And it took us a little bit more than 10 years to pay off all our debt. And we did. So when I retired from the Navy, my retirement plus the VA means I don't have to earn any other money. But I do earn other money through podcasting and speaking and a few other things. And we get the life that we want to live because we took the time to design the life that we wanted. COVID did a great thing for humanity and showed us that we don't have to be tied to an office building, which means you can get hired at a New York firm and live in Oklahoma City prices.
I know. Isn't that fantastic?
It's so fantastic. If you are listening to this right now, you have to know that you are more than you think you are. You are more than you were told, and you are capable of doing anything. Anything is possible. Probably by the end of my life, we're going to have a colony on Mars, and we're going to have teleportation as an option for travel. Like, people are actively working on these things. What's the thing that you're going to solve? Are you going to be who you are and who you were meant to be? Or are you going to be what other people told you you could do and put you in this tiny little box on a shelf that said you could only do this and nothing else? Who are you going to believe?
Put people in the cage and, let them survive in there, but there's this big, vast world out there, and you have a choice to decide what you want to do.
You don't know what you want to do? Find a podcast dedicated to something you might be interested in. If you want to,
good point.
like, if you want to be told you're more than you're worth, you should probably listen to the Titan Evolution podcast. If you have an interest on cryptocurrency, find a cryptocurrency podcast, learn about it. If you want to get into business and you don't know how it could possibly apply to you, listen to JLD on Entrepreneurs on Fire and let entrepreneurs that make all their money doing things tell you about a different way to do business. If you want to learn about podcasting, you can catch most of my shows on, or you can go check out, Titan podcasttitan.com and see the stuff we have available there. There's so many things out there, but you have to pursue it. It's probably going to cost you some money. Do you know what else costs money? Waiting costs you money. Going to college costs you money. Working at a job costs you money because you're not in the career you're supposed to be in. You're not learning the things you're supposed to be learning. It's going to cost you something, but if you do nothing, that costs you even more, because that means you might not sign for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years.
It just delays your progress, literally.
Just delays your progress. When I started listening to audiobooks, changed my world, because I could go on a bicycle ride, I could go right 13 miles and hear some expert in some field downloading their life's experience into a few-hour audiobook that I could listen to while I was working out, while I was commuting, while I was running errands or cleaning the house. I listened to more than 60 books a year for 3 years in a row. Do you think that changed who I was?
Oh,
I bet your ass it did. I bet your ass it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I learned about
and all that knowledge
possible.
Accumulated. Yeah.
Yeah. You learn about what's possible. You understand some things. You learn a little bit more here, a little bit more there. You get in a group of like-minded people that are dedicated to helping each other grow and develop and do great things. Oh man, fucking watch out.
It changes your life tremendously.
Oh my
I think
God.
that's the problem we get into, is we get into a rut and we hang around the same people and we expect things to change, and it never changes, does it? Because you're not broadening the scope of individuals you're surrounding yourself with. You have to do that.
Exactly. If you're around people that complain about their minimum wage job and then they come home and they get enough pot or enough beer for the weekend and they spend all their money and they go back and do it again, they complain about it again, get enough money for a pot or beer for the weekend and then do it again. What do you think is going to be your life is going to look like?
Yeah.
It's going to look exactly like theirs. If you're hanging around with people, if you want to be in shape, you're not in shape, start hanging around with people that go to the gym. Guess what? You're going to wake up one morning and find your ass in the gym.
Yep.
If you want to be more educated,
be a daily occurrence. Yep.
Yeah. If you want to be more educated, who's educating themselves? Who's reading books? Who's listening to audiobooks? Who's listening to podcasts? Who's going to college? Hang around those people. You're going to find yourself being encouraged. You're going to learn things you didn't know you needed to know. If you want to lose your money, find people that are going to the casino playing slots every day. You're going to find yourself in a casino losing your money every weekend. Like, who do you want to be like? What kind of person do you want to be? Find those people and hang out. Is it easy? No. Because you have to give up on your security of what you have, even if you complain about it every day. But what you're going to do is you're going to let go of that mask that costs way more energy, who you're pretending to be instead of who you're meant to be.
Oh, God. Good way to end
it. Great way to end it. Welcome to my TED Talk. This has been Travis Johnson.
Oh, Travis, thanks for sharing your story.
Hey, thanks for asking to hear my story. I appreciate that, Carol. And thanks for being my partner in this endeavor as we co-host the Titan Evolution podcast.
No, it's been absolutely my pleasure and my honor. And I'm so enjoying this because this really hits home for me.
I'm so glad that we're able to do this together.
That's all for this episode of Titan Evolution Podcast. We hope this no-holds-barred conversation opened your eyes on what it takes to live a genuinely happy life according to your own terms. Now that you've treated yourself to such a refreshing discussion, you cannot listen to nonsense content anymore. Be sure not to miss an episode by subscribing to the show at TitanEvolutionPodcast.com. Don't forget to share the word so more people can be enlightened, informed, and entertained. Thank you for listening.